My name is Eleanor Mitchell. I'm 73 years old, and I've learned that sometimes the cruelest betrayals happen in broad daylight, wrapped in the normalcy of a Sunday afternoon. The day I found my grandson Daniel shivering outside his own home, locked out while laughter echoed from the backyard pool, I knew something inside me had shifted. Something quiet and patient had finally reached its limit. What happened next would tear apart carefully constructed lies and force everyone to see what I'd been watching for 2 long years: the systematic erasure of a child who deserved better. I'd always believed that love should be unconditional, especially within families. That's what my late husband Robert taught me during our 47 years together. We'd built our life on simple principles: honesty, hard work, and treating people with dignity regardless of their bank accounts or last names. When Robert passed 5 years ago, he left me comfortable, not extravagantly wealthy, but secure in ways that came from decades of careful investments and modest living. I'd kept that information private, wearing my simple cardigans and driving my old sedan, because I'd learned long ago that money changes how people see you. My son Marcus was my only child, and I'd watched him grow from a sensitive boy into a successful architect. His first marriage to Jennifer had given me Daniel, a gentle-souled child with his grandfather's curiosity and kindness. When Jennifer died in a car accident 3 years ago, I watched my son crumble. Daniel was only 7 then, confused and grieving, and I stepped in to help however I could. For a year we managed, Marcus, Daniel, and I, stumbling through grief together. Then Vanessa arrived. She was beautiful in that calculated way some women perfect, all highlighted hair and practiced smiles. Marcus met her at some charity function his firm sponsored, and within months he was transformed. I wanted to be happy for him. God knows I wanted my son to find companionship again, to have support raising Daniel. But something about Vanessa made my instincts prickle. The way her warmth vanished when she thought no one was watching. How her voice changed when speaking to Daniel versus her own 2 children from her previous marriage. They married quickly, too quickly, I thought, but I held my tongue. Vanessa came with Brittany, 14, and Chase, 12, both cut from their mother's cloth, entitled dismissive. Already masters at the kind of casual cruelty that leaves no visible bruises. The changes started subtly. Family dinners that somehow Daniel wasn't informed about. School events where Marcus arrived late because Vanessa had scheduled something for Chase at the same time. Daniel's room, once filled with his mother's photos and his rock collection, slowly emptied as Vanessa redecorated to make the house feel more cohesive. I watched my grandson fade, his laughter becoming rare, his shoulders perpetually hunched as if bracing for the next dismissal. I said something once, carefully, to Marcus over coffee. He'd looked pained and defensive simultaneously. "Mom, blending families is complicated. Vanessa's doing her best. Daniel needs to adjust. He can't expect everything to stay the same forever." I'd backed off then, not wanting to drive a wedge between us. But I kept watching, and what I saw made my blood run cold. The Sunday I found Daniel in the rain started ordinarily enough. I'd called that morning to see if I could take Daniel to the Natural History Museum. He'd been fascinated by fossils lately, just like Robert had been. Marcus answered, distracted. "Oh, Mom, actually we're having a pool day. Family bonding, you know. Maybe next weekend?" Something in his tone bothered me. A forced cheerfulness. I'd said that was fine, but after I hung up, I couldn't settle. It was late April, barely 60 degrees and raining on and off. What pool day? 2 hours later, I drove to their house in Riverside Estates, one of those developments where every home looked expensively identical. I told myself I was just dropping off the fossil book I'd bought for Daniel anyway, but truthfully, my instincts were screaming. The scene I discovered will haunt me forever. Daniel sat on the front porch steps, soaked through, his thin jacket offering no protection against the drizzling rain. His backpack was beside him, and he was hunched over, arms wrapped around his knees, 10 years old and locked out of his own home. I parked quickly and rushed toward him. "Daniel? Sweetheart, what are you doing out here?" He looked up, and the expression on his face, resignation mixed with embarrassment, made my heart crack. "Hi, Grandma. I forgot my key." "Why didn't you ring the doorbell?" His eyes slid away. "I did. Nobody heard." But I could hear them. Laughter and splashing from the backyard, music playing. They'd installed a heated pool last month, Vanessa's demand, and apparently they were enjoying it despite the weather. "How long have you been out here?" I kept my voice gentle, though rage was building in my chest. "I don't know. I walked home from Tyler's house. Maybe an hour?" An hour. My grandson had been sitting in the rain for an hour while his family swam and played 50 feet away. I helped him up, feeling how cold his hands were. "Come on, let's go inside." "I don't have my key, Grandma." "Then we'll ring until someone answers." I pressed the doorbell repeatedly, then knocked, then pounded. Finally, Chase appeared, wet hair dripping, annoyed. "What? We're busy." "Open this door right now." My voice carried a tone I rarely used, one that had made boardrooms go quiet during my years managing Robert's business affairs. Chase's eyes widened slightly, but he opened the door. I guided Daniel inside, where he left wet footprints on Vanessa's pristine marble floors. I didn't care. Vanessa appeared from the kitchen in a designer swimsuit cover-up, Brittany trailing behind her. "Eleanor? We weren't expecting you." "Clearly. Why was Daniel locked outside in the rain for an hour?" She blinked, her expression shifting to concerned innocence, so quickly I would have missed it if I hadn't been watching for exactly that manipulation. "What? Daniel, honey, why didn't you ring the doorbell?" "He did ring," I said coldly, "for an hour." "Well, the music was on. We didn't hear. Where's Marcus?" "He ran to the store for more chlorine tablets." Of course he did. Vanessa had a talent for creating situations where Marcus was conveniently absent during her worst moments. I'd noticed that pattern over the past 2 years. I looked at Daniel, shivering beside me, then at Brittany and Chase in their pool clothes, dry and warm. Something crystallized in that moment. This wasn't going to stop. Vanessa would continue engineering these accidents and misunderstandings, and Marcus would continue believing her explanations, and Daniel would continue fading until he disappeared entirely. I'd been patient. I'd been diplomatic. I'd given them chances to do better. I was done with all of that. "Daniel, go upstairs and change into dry clothes," I said. "Pack a bag. You're staying with me tonight." Vanessa's mask slipped. "Excuse me? You can't just take him. This is his home, and I'm his stepmother." His stepmother, who left him locked outside in the rain while her children enjoyed the heated pool. "Yes, I'm aware of your role here." "That was an accident." Of course it was. Just like it was an accident that he wasn't told about the family trip to the amusement park last month. An accident that his science fair project materials disappeared before the deadline. An accident that somehow every family photo in the living room features your children, but not him. Her face flushed. "You have no right to come into my home and make accusations. This is my son's home, and my grandson's home, and I have every right to protect a child who's being systematically excluded and emotionally abused." The word hung in the air. Abused. Brittany's eyes went wide. Chase looked uncomfortable. Vanessa's expression turned venomous. "Get out! Get out of my house right now, or I'm calling the police." "Please do. I'd love to explain to them why a 10-year-old was locked outside in 40-degree weather for over an hour while his family was home." We stood there, locked in a silent battle. Daniel reappeared with his backpack, now stuffed with clothes. His face was carefully blank, and that blankness told me everything about how often he'd learned to hide his feelings. I took his hand. "Let's go, sweetheart." As we walked to my car, I heard Vanessa on the phone, voice high and agitated, calling Marcus. Let her spin this however she wanted. I had my grandson safe, and that was all that mattered in that moment. But as I drove away, watching Daniel in the rearview mirror, he'd fallen asleep almost immediately, exhausted from stress and cold, I made a decision. I was going to end this. Not with shouting or drama, but with the one thing Vanessa understood perfectly: power. For 2 years, I'd played the role of the simple grandmother, the sweet old woman in cardigans who baked cookies and stayed out of the way. I'd hidden my assets, my connections, my sharp understanding of exactly how the world worked when you had resources. I'd done that because Robert and I had always believed in humility, in not flaunting wealth, in letting people see your character rather than your bank account. But humility had allowed my grandson to suffer, and I was done with that version of myself. The next morning, after Daniel had slept 14 hours straight and finally eaten a proper breakfast, I made a phone call to someone I'd met 25 years ago during a business merger who'd climbed impressively high in the legal world since then. "Carolyn, it's Eleanor Mitchell. I need your help with a family matter, and I need someone who doesn't lose." That phone call was the first domino. The second was to Marcus, who arrived at my door 2 hours later, looking exhausted and defensive. "Mom, you can't just take Daniel without discussing it with us first." "Sit down, Marcus." Something in my tone made him obey. I'd raised this man, and somewhere under the stress and new marriage and desperate desire to make everyone happy, my son was still there. I had to reach him. "Tell me the truth. Do you know Daniel was outside in the rain for over an hour yesterday?" He shifted uncomfortably. "Vanessa said it was maybe 15 minutes, and they had music on." "It was over an hour, Marcus." I found him shivering and soaked through. He'd rung the bell repeatedly. "Do you honestly believe your wife and her children didn't hear?" "Accidents happen, Mom." "Of course they do. So let me ask you about some other accidents. The family trip to the amusement park Daniel wasn't told about. His missing science fair materials. The fact that every single photo in your living room has been replaced with ones that don't include your son. His bedroom that's been redecorated so thoroughly that nothing of his mother remains. Are those accidents too?" Marcus's face had gone pale. "You're making it sound worse than it is. Blending families is hard. There are growing pains. Marcus, look at me." I waited until his eyes met mine. "When's the last time you saw Daniel truly happy?" He opened his mouth, closed it, couldn't answer. "When's the last time you spent time alone with him, just the two of you?" Again, silence. "Your son is disappearing, Marcus, not because of grief anymore, because he's being systematically erased from his own family, and you're letting it happen. That's not fair. I'm trying to balance everyone's needs, at the expense of a 10-year-old who already lost his mother, who's now losing his father too." I watched the words hit him, watched something crack in his expression. For a moment, I thought I'd reached him. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and I saw his face close off. "Vanessa's very upset. She feels attacked and unwelcome in her own home. She's talking about boundaries, about how you're undermining her authority as Daniel's stepmother." There it was, the script she'd fed him, perfectly delivered. "I see." I stood up. "Then let me be clear about my boundaries. Daniel will stay with me until I'm convinced he's safe and valued in your home. If you attempt to remove him against his will, I'll file for emergency custody. I have documentation of the pattern of neglect and emotional abuse. I have witness statements, and I have resources you're not aware of to ensure this gets heard properly." Marcus stared at me like I'd grown a second head. "Mom, what are you talking about? You can't just... You don't have the resources for a custody battle. This is crazy." I handed him a folder I'd prepared that morning. Inside were financial statements showing assets he'd never known about, a letter from Carolyn Fisher outlining my legal position, and a detailed timeline of every incident I'd witnessed or Daniel had mentioned over the past 2 years. He read it, and the color drained from his face. "You have $12 million in investment accounts? How did I not... When did..." "Your father and I were very good at our work, Marcus. We just never felt the need to advertise it. I've lived modestly because that's who I am, not because I had to." "And you're threatening to use this against me? Against your own son?" "I'm threatening to use this to protect my grandson. There's a difference." I kept my voice gentle but firm. "I love you, Marcus. But I love Daniel too, and right now, he's the one who needs me. You have a choice. You can fight me, and you'll lose, and it will destroy our relationship permanently. or you can take a hard look at what's happening in your home and fix it." He stood there, trembling slightly, the folder shaking in his hands. "I don't know how this got so bad. I thought everything was fine." That's what people who are good at manipulation do. They make you think everything's fine while they systematically isolate and diminish their target. Vanessa is very good at this, Marcus. I think she's had practice. He left without another word, and I watched him drive away, wondering if I'd just lost my son in the process of saving my grandson. Daniel stayed with me. Those weeks were revelatory. Away from the tension of his home, he slowly unfurled. His laughter returned. He talked about his feelings, how invisible he felt, how he tried so hard to be good enough for Vanessa to like him, how he was scared his dad didn't want him anymore. Every word was a knife to my heart. I enrolled him in a day camp I'd researched, where he made friends and discovered he was talented at photography. I took him to therapy with Dr. Reeves, a child psychologist Carolyn recommended. I made sure he knew every single day that he was wanted, valued, loved. Meanwhile, the legal process ground forward. Carolyn was indeed as formidable as I remembered. She filed for temporary custody with a motion hearing scheduled for 6 weeks out. She deposed Vanessa. I heard that went poorly for her, that her performative charm didn't work on someone trained to spot manipulation. She interviewed Brittany and Chase separately, and while I never learned exactly what they said, Carolyn emerged looking grimly satisfied. She also did something I hadn't requested. She hired an investigator to look into Vanessa's background. What we learned explained everything. Vanessa had done this before. Her first husband, Charles, Chase and Brittany's father, had also been a widower with a child when she married him. That child, a daughter named Sophie, had been gradually pushed out of the family until at age 14 she'd chosen to live with her aunt rather than remain in the home. Charles's sister had tried to warn people, but Vanessa had been skilled at playing the victim, claiming the teenager was troubled and resentful. It was a pattern. Vanessa specifically targeted successful widowers with children, presented herself as the solution to their grief and chaos, then systematically eliminated the existing children while elevating her own. Sophie's testimony, now age 19 and willing to talk, was devastating. It was Daniel's future, written out in advance. I showed the report to Marcus over coffee in my kitchen while Daniel was at camp. He read it in silence, his hands shaking. "I didn't know," he whispered. "I swear to God, Mom, I didn't know." "I believe you. She's very good at hiding it, but now you do know. So what are you going to do?" The hearing came faster than expected. Vanessa's lawyer, apparently realizing how bad the deposition and background investigation looked, tried to negotiate, but Carolyn was merciless. "Your client has a documented pattern of child displacement spanning 2 marriages. We have testimony from her first husband's daughter. We have testimony from teachers who've noticed Daniel's decline. We have medical records showing he's lost 12 pounds since the marriage. We have the incident where he was locked outside in the rain. What exactly do you think you're negotiating from?" In the end, there was no hearing. Marcus filed for divorce. The decision came from him, arrived at through weeks of individual therapy that I insisted on as a condition for Daniel returning home. His therapist helped him see what he'd been refusing to acknowledge, that his desire for a complete family had blinded him to the abuse happening in front of him. Vanessa did not go quietly. There were threats, accusations, attempts to claim I'd bought Marcus's decision. Her lawyer tried to argue for a lengthy divorce process, hoping to drag things out. But Marcus, finally awake to the situation, was immovable. He filed for divorce on grounds of emotional abuse toward Daniel, with custody terms that gave Vanessa no access to his son. The Sunday that defined everything came 6 weeks after I'd found Daniel in the rain. Vanessa was scheduled to move out, having finally accepted that her marriage was over. Marcus had asked me to bring Daniel to the house so they could be together as a family, just the 2 of them, while Vanessa packed. But when we arrived, Vanessa's family was there. Her mother, her sister, her brother, all gathered in the driveway, apparently for some final confrontation. I'd called Carolyn on the drive over just in case. Something feels off. Can you come to the house? She'd agreed, and now her sleek black town car pulled up behind mine. Carolyn emerged, all 6 feet of her in a power suit, looking every inch the attorney who'd made partners at major firms weep. Vanessa's mother stepped forward, a woman who shared her daughter's calculating eyes. You must be the grandmother with all the money, the one who bought herself a grandson. I'm the grandmother who protected her grandson from systematic emotional abuse, not quite the same thing. You destroyed my daughter's marriage. Your daughter destroyed her marriage by targeting a widower with a child she planned to erase, just like she did with Charles and Sophie. Did she tell you about that? About the pattern she's repeated? The woman's face flickered, just briefly, with something that might have been knowledge. She'd known. Maybe not the details, but she'd known her daughter had issues. Vanessa herself appeared from the house, tears streaming down her face in a performance that would have won awards. How can you do this to me? I loved that boy. I tried so hard to be a good mother to him. Daniel pressed against my side. I could feel him trembling. Carolyn stepped forward, her voice cutting through the theatrics like a blade. Mrs. Winters, I'm Eleanor Mitchell's attorney. I'm going to give you one opportunity to leave this property quietly with your possessions and dignity intact. If you choose instead to continue this scene, I will ensure that every custody agreement you have regarding Brittany and Chase includes mandatory therapy and monitoring, because any judge who sees the evidence we've compiled will have concerns about your fitness as a parent to any child. The threat landed. Vanessa's face went white, then red. You can't do that. They're my children. And Daniel is Marcus's child, yet you locked him outside in the rain while yours played in the heated pool. You systematically excluded him from family activities. You removed every trace of his deceased mother from his room. You engineered situations designed to make him feel unwanted in his own home. A pattern you've apparently perfected over multiple marriages. Carolyn's voice was clinical, precise. So yes, Mrs. Winters, I can absolutely do that. Because the moment you chose to abuse one child while favoring your own, you demonstrated that your parenting is conditional and potentially harmful. Now, are you leaving quietly, or shall we have this conversation in front of a judge? The silence stretched out. Vanessa's mother grabbed her daughter's arm, pulling her toward the moving truck. Come on, we're done here. They left, all of them, loading boxes and furniture while shooting poisonous looks in our direction. Brittany cried. Chase looked confused. Vanessa maintained her performance until the very end, sobbing about how unfair this all was, how she'd been nothing but loving. When the truck finally pulled away, Marcus emerged from the house. He looked hollowed out, years older than he had 3 months ago. But when he saw Daniel, something in his face softened. Hey, buddy. Want to come inside? I thought we could order pizza and watch that movie about the dinosaur fossils you mentioned. Daniel looked up at me, uncertain. I squeezed his shoulder. Go ahead, sweetheart. I'll be here if you need me. He went, slowly at first, then faster, as Marcus knelt down and opened his arms. I watched them embrace, father and son, beginning the long process of rebuilding what had been broken. Carolyn stood beside me, watching the same scene. You did good work here, Eleanor. That boy has a chance now. We did good work. I couldn't have done this without you. Yes, you could have. You just would have been less efficient about it. She smiled slightly. Though I admit the look on Vanessa's face when she realized you had $12 million in assets and connections she couldn't manipulate was immensely satisfying. I thought about that moment, the shock, the recalculation, the dawning awareness that she'd badly underestimated the woman she'd dismissed as a simple grandmother. Robert used to say that the most dangerous people are the ones who keep their power quiet. I never really understood what he meant until now. In the months that followed, life found a new rhythm. Daniel moved back home, but Marcus and I established clear boundaries and regular check-ins. Family therapy became non-negotiable. Dr. Reeves worked with both of them to rebuild trust and communication. Daniel's transformation was gradual but profound. The weight returned to his frame. His laughter became frequent again. He joined the school photography club and discovered he had an artist's eye for composition. His room was redecorated again, this time with his input, filled with photos of his mother, his rock collection, his interests. Marcus changed too. The divorce was painful and expensive. Vanessa fought for every penny, despite Carolyn's threats, but it freed him to see clearly for the first time in years. He cut back his work hours. He attended Daniel's school events. He learned to listen when his son spoke, instead of just hearing his wife's interpretation of events. We never heard from Vanessa again after the divorce finalized, though I kept alerts on her through various channels. She moved 3 states away, and within a year, she was dating another widower. I sent an anonymous package of information to his sister, letting her know about the pattern. What that family did with the information was their choice, but I slept better, knowing I'd tried to prevent another child from experiencing what Daniel had endured. One evening, about 4 months after everything settled, Daniel and I sat on my back porch watching the sunset. He'd been quiet, working on something in his journal that he'd kept private. Finally, he showed me. It was a photo series titled Before and After. The before images were subtle but devastating, shots of himself looking small and hunched, of empty spaces where photos should be, of his room stripped of personality. The after images showed him laughing, surrounded by friends, his room alive with color and interests, his face open and unguarded. "For the school art show," he explained quietly, "Mr. Brennan says I should title it something about finding yourself again. But I don't think I was lost. I think someone was trying to erase me, and you stopped them." I pulled him close, this child who'd survived something that would have broken many adults. "You stopped them too, Daniel. You held on to yourself even when they tried to make you disappear. That takes more strength than you know." Why did she hate me so much, Grandma? It was the question I'd been dreading. "I don't think she hated you, sweetheart. I think she saw you as competition for resources and attention. Some people are only capable of loving conditionally, only when it benefits them. That's not about your worth. That's about what's missing inside them." He processed that for a moment. "Dad says he's sorry, that he should have seen it earlier." "And what do you say?" I say, "I'm glad he sees it now. It's not the same as before Mom died, but it's better than it was with Vanessa." Children are remarkably resilient, but they're also honest in ways adults forget how to be. Daniel had given Marcus the truth. It's better now. Not perfect, not healed entirely, but better. And sometimes better is enough to build on. A year later, Daniel's photo series won a regional art competition. The judges called it emotionally mature beyond his years and a powerful statement on childhood resilience. At the awards ceremony, Marcus sat beside me, both of us crying proud tears as Daniel accepted his medal. On the way home, Daniel asked if we could stop by the cemetery. We stood at Jennifer's grave together, the 3 of us who loved her most. Daniel placed his medal against the headstone. "I think Mom would have liked knowing you saved me, Grandma. Dad says she would have done the same thing if she was still here." "Your mother was a fierce protector," I agreed. "Just like you're becoming." Marcus cleared his throat. "Mom, I never properly thanked you for seeing what I couldn't see, for having the courage to act when I was too blind and scared. You saved my son. You saved us." I took both their hands. Family protects family. That's not something I need thanks for. That's just what love looks like when it's real. As we drove home in the fading twilight, I thought about that rainy Sunday that changed everything. The moment I'd found Daniel locked out and made the decision to stop being quiet and polite. To weaponize resources I'd kept hidden out of modesty. To fight back against someone who'd relied on me staying small and powerless. Robert would have approved. He'd always said that humility was a virtue, but so was protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. And sometimes virtue requires showing your teeth. I learned something profound through this experience, that there's a difference between causing drama and refusing to accept abuse quietly. That resources aren't just money, they're also knowledge, connections, courage, and the willingness to make people uncomfortable when comfort enables harm. That sometimes the most loving thing you can do is become the villain in someone else's story because you're the hero in the story that matters more. Vanessa had counted on me being a typical grandmother, sweet, passive, easily dismissed. She'd made the fatal error of assuming that my quiet life meant I was powerless. She never considered that power kept silent is simply power waiting for the right moment to speak. The black car that arrived that day, Carolyn's town car, became a symbol Daniel referenced sometimes. "The day Grandma called in the cavalry," he'd say with a grin. It wasn't just about the lawyer, though Carolyn was certainly formidable. It was about the moment when someone who'd been systematically diminished realized they had an advocate who wouldn't back down, who had resources and connections and sheer determination, who loved them enough to risk family relationships and comfortable peace to ensure their safety. That's what the black car represented, the arrival of consequence for people who believed they were untouchable. 2 years after the divorce, Marcus started dating again, carefully, slowly, with Daniel's input every step of the way. The woman he eventually introduced to us, Karen, was a widow herself with no children. She was kind, genuine, and made it clear from the first meeting that she understood Daniel came first. No blending, no replacement mother narrative, just authentic friendship that might become something more over time. Daniel approved. More than that, he relaxed around her in ways he'd never relaxed around Vanessa. The difference between someone seeking to replace versus someone seeking to add value was stark when you'd experienced both. I watched them together one evening, Marcus, Daniel, and Karen making dinner in my kitchen, laughing over some joke about burned garlic bread, and felt something unclench in my chest. This was what family should look like. Imperfect but genuine. Struggling but trying. Built on truth rather than performance. Later that night, after they'd gone home, I sat in Robert's study among his books and old photographs. I spoke to him the way I sometimes did, when the house felt too quiet. "I think you'd be proud of what we did, love. I think you'd say I used everything we built the right way, not for luxury or status, but to protect someone small and vulnerable from someone powerful and cruel. That's what you always said wealth was for, leverage against injustice." I imagined his response, that dry humor he'd had. "Took you long enough to show your teeth, Eleanor. I was wondering when you'd remember you're not actually a sweet little old lady. You're a sweet little old lady with an MBA and excellent investment instincts. There's a difference." I smiled at the imagined conversation. He was right, of course. I'd let myself be dismissed and underestimated because it was easier, more comfortable, because confrontation felt unpleasant and unseemly. But comfort built on a child's suffering isn't comfort at all. It's cowardice wearing a polite mask. The real lesson wasn't about money or lawyers or dramatic confrontations. It was about recognizing when silence stops being wisdom and starts being complicity. About understanding that keeping peace sometimes means accepting war. About knowing that the people who tell you to not make waves are often the ones drowning someone just beneath the surface. I'd made waves, I'd made a tsunami, and I'd do it again without hesitation. Daniel graduated middle school last month with honors in art and science. His teacher pulled me aside at the ceremony. I don't know what happened in Daniel's life between 5th and 6th grade, but the transformation has been remarkable. He went from a child who seemed to be disappearing into himself to someone confident and engaged. "You clearly did something right." I thought about telling her the whole story, about Vanessa and the rain and the custody battle and everything that came after. But instead I just smiled and said, "He did something right. He survived until someone could help him. That's all the strength really comes from him." But as I watched Daniel walk across the stage to receive his awards, I allowed myself a moment of pride, not for the dramatic confrontation or the legal victory, but for the quieter achievement underneath it all. I'd seen a child in trouble. I'd believed him even when his own father couldn't. I'd acted when action felt risky and uncomfortable. I'd used every resource at my disposal not for personal gain but for protection. That's what power is supposed to be for. As we left the ceremony, Daniel walking between Marcus and me, he suddenly stopped and hugged me, just wrapped his gangly teenage arms around me and held on. I never said thank you for that day, for finding me in the rain and not just taking me home and forgetting about it, for calling someone, for the black car. He pulled back, and his eyes were suspiciously bright. You saved my life, Grandma. Like, actually. I don't know if I'd have made it if you hadn't noticed. I cupped his face, this beloved child who'd become a thoughtful young man. I'll always notice, Daniel, and I'll always show up. That's what love means, not the word, but the action. Marcus's voice was rough with emotion. Both of you saved me, too. From being the kind of father who failed his child because he was too weak to see the truth. From becoming someone I'd have hated. We stood there in the parking lot as families streamed past us, 3 people bound by love and trauma and redemption, and I thought about journeys, how they're not always about distance traveled, but about becoming who you need to be when someone needs you most. I'd spent 73 years being one version of Eleanor Mitchell, modest, quiet, unobtrusive. I discovered, when it mattered most, that I could be another version too, fierce, strategic, immovable when protecting someone I loved. Both versions were true. Both versions were me. The key was knowing when each was needed. As we drove home through the summer evening, Daniel chattering about high school plans and Marcus making terrible dad jokes, I felt Robert's presence like a warm hand on my shoulder. Well done, he seemed to say. You remembered what matters. You fought the fight worth fighting. I had. And I would again, if necessary. Because that's what those with resources and power owe those without. Protection. Advocacy. The willingness to become uncomfortable in service of someone else's safety. The black car that arrived that rainy Sunday wasn't just Carolyn's town car. It was a symbol of something larger. The arrival of consequence. The arrival of protection. The moment when someone small and dismissed realized they had a champion who wouldn't let them disappear. Every child deserves that moment, that advocate, that person who sees their suffering and refuses to explain it away or minimize it or wait for it to resolve itself. I'd been that person for Daniel, and in being that person, I'd discovered a truth I carried with me always afterward, that love without action is just sentiment, that power without purpose is just wealth, and that sometimes the most important thing you can do is refuse to stay quiet when quiet means complicity. My name is Eleanor Mitchell. I'm 73 years old, and I learned that the greatest gifts we can give aren't inheritance or money or comfort. They're belief, action, and the willingness to fight for those who can't yet fight for themselves. That rainy Sunday changed all of us, Daniel, Marcus, and me. It broke us open and forced us to rebuild as better, truer versions of ourselves. It taught us that family isn't just blood and genetics. It's choosing each other, protecting each other, showing up even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. And if I had to sum up everything I learned from finding my grandson in the rain and making the decision to finally take action, it would be this. Don't wait for perfect certainty before protecting someone vulnerable. Don't let politeness silence you when someone is being hurt. Don't hide your resources when deploying them could change a life. And never, ever underestimate what a grandmother will do when you threaten her grandchild. The black car arrived because I made the call. But I could only make that call because I'd finally accepted that having power meant nothing if I didn't use it when it mattered most. Use your power. Make the call. Be the black car in someone's story. It might just save their life.